Alan Quinlan is with us to talk about the second leg of the Champions Cup this week and a bit more about Graham Rowntree as well now that he's been confirmed. Alan, good morning to you. How are you getting on?
Good, lads. Thanks. And yourselves?
The scoreboard showing the actual score is a good idea that people have had across the week. We're all going to have to use our mental maths to make sure that we know exactly what the crack is with it. But the two legs have kind of worked out, I think.
Yeah, it has. I think we obviously had a lot of issues during in the pool stages with COVID, and the whole format was questioned. I think the competition has come alive. There's no doubt about it. Obviously, for EPCR, changing the format was driven by COVID in the last couple of seasons, and so much history attached to this competition. We have had issues before with some of the French teams, some English teams probably when they lose a game in the pool stages at home, throwing the towel in and stuff like that. But this is exactly what people wanted. The intrigue last weekend was fantastic, and right across the board there was top quality games, and there was a bite and an intensity to them which everybody wanted, and I think the competition really needed.
Let's start by talking about Connacht, just because it's top of the head, and we had Andy Friend on the show yesterday. You don't want to patronise Connacht, right? But their performance against Leinster was excellent and nearly amazing. And they still, the whole world expects them, maybe the exception of the team themselves, expects them to lose and to go out of the competition because they're -5 starting against Leinster at home. But I think even with all of the conversations around Connacht, we still underrate the job that Andy Friend is doing at this stage. Is that fair?
Yeah, it is. I think it's probably they haven't been consistent enough, I think, and that's probably the level they need to get to. They're probably a little bit underpowered in that front five area, and it does come against them sometimes when they're playing bigger physical teams. I think the way they play the game is probably the only way they can. So that's why he's the right man for the job with Connacht. Every team wants to have big bruising forwards to provide a platform for you. And, it doesn't happen. The depth in those areas, ball playing, front rows, we see what, Leinster, the depth they have in that area and how it affects the way they want to play and the impacts those guys have in the game. Having played in the back row, I always had that thing in my head, and it'll never change. If you're front five or workhorses, they're making big impacts. They're having physical power moments in the game. It just makes your job easier right across the board with the players behind them. So, look, I think he's done a wonderful job. I think they're a very positive side to watch in the way they play. Their ambition is second to none. Decision making really good, and I think it's probably a bit frustrating that they're one kind of step away from really, and I mean this respectfully, competing with the big powerful teams, and they've probably lost too many games in the URC.
Yeah,
they're in a position now where they may not make Europe.
Well,
next year.
Just want to talk about that briefly, right? Like we were talking about West Ham earlier, and they don't really have the squad size to compete on two fronts, and it looks like they've completely prioritised Europe over the last 4 or 5 weeks, as there's an opportunity for them to get into the Champions League next season if they win the Europa League. From Connacht's perspective, it would, on the face of it, be kind of devastating not to be in the Heineken Cup, considering here we are talking about the great performance in the Heineken Cup against Leinster. But is there a long-term world in which actually having one thing and all the eggs in the basket next year in one competition really, again, you could not prioritise whatever the second European competition is. Is there any possibility that might actually be better for them in the long run?
Yeah, I don't know. I think it's hard to mentally kind of get into that situation where you would, I'm sure, if they were in a good position during the URC and, looking like they'll be in the playoffs and that they're going to qualify for Europe next year, they'd be very, very pleased with that. And then it would probably take a little bit of pressure off the knockout stages of Europe, that anything after that is a bonus. So I think you've got to prioritise the league. they're in danger of missing out on both, aren't they? You know,
because they don't have the resources, I suppose, is the
yeah,
point.
I think, yeah, it's depth, and it's particularly depth in that front five areas. Look, they've recruited very smartly. You know, Mac Hansen has been a brilliant signing for him. I think, you know, that's the issue for him. And Munster have similar issues with front row kind of resources. They're very hard to get, top quality props, hookers, players who can play the modern game the way you need to play. So I think it's depth in those areas, and we've seen their set piece struggle this year. You know, that scrum last week where Leinster scored the Hugo Quinlan try, where in the second half where their scrum capitulated. They're the small moments in a game, Ger, that wins you big games, when you can lock out that scrum when you're defending your own line, or you can steal a line out or whatever, or create a score from a maul. So being underpowered in those areas, you have to find different ways of playing. And there's some similarities with Munster, because I think with Munster having the players injured, obviously it gives them some mitigation. But for Connacht, I think that's the concern, and that's the challenge for Andy Friend, is to try and get more depth. We saw it over in Leicester in the pool game that they lost, the way they were leading that game. It looked like it was going to be a historic way win, and then it all changes with the scrum and maul defence. So they're the challenges that he has, but I think he has done a brilliant job. Connacht people won't want you to patronise him in this scenario of it's a good news story. They want to win things, but I think maybe going back to your question, it for me, the league games are incredibly important, and they've lost too many of them this year with inconsistent performances.
Yeah, and it's a trip to South Africa next, so it's not going to be easy for them from this point. It would be very unlikely, or more unlikely than likely, that they will actually end up qualifying for those knockout stages. So let's go on. We're hearing that it's going to be the Ireland front row, the original Ireland front row, as opposed to the new Ireland front row that starts from a Leinster perspective whenever that team gets named. That Kelleher is going to be back, and Andrew Porter. Just as you're like, oh great, we've got to within 5 points and it's going to be exciting now. It's at the Aviva. We played really well there against Ulster. It's like, oh great, it's an even better Leinster team that we have to go up against.
Yeah, it is. It's and that's the depth that they have, I think. And to have Kelleher and Porter back at this stage for Leinster is a huge boost. I think they'd love to have James Ryan and Ryan Baird back, and I think they will be crucial if Leinster progress here and into the quarterfinals, semi-finals, beyond. I think they're the team to beat in this competition. It's the one area I'd be worried about, the second row situation, if they progress forward. And they can't underestimate Leinster or with Connacht in any way. I think they've got to be really wary that this is the last kind of throw of the dice for Connacht. They'll put everything into this, and if you give them any sort of time and space and stand off them. But I think Leinster are too good to, and they'll know that. Leo Cullen will know that. Stuart Lancaster, the players. But to have Porter and Kelleher coming back, and we're just talking about the impact, what these guys do with the ball, without the ball. Traditionally, a good prop was someone who was a good scrummager and a good line-out lifter and a good mauler. Now we're judging props and hookers on what to do around the field, and these guys are world class, and I think they've shown it on the international stage as well. The tackles, tackle reload, the poaches, the carries,
it's a full package,
and the power. Yeah, it's a full package. And as a back row forward, if you're out there continuously tackling Ronan Kelleher, Tyg Furlong, Andrew Porter, it's a nightmare, because they're just different. They can step, they've acceleration, they've so much power, they can smash you in a tackle. So that's why they're so good, and they're unique players.
How damaging would it be for Connacht if they got an absolute hiding here in terms of their journey?
Well, it really dampened really kind of put a negative spin in the season, I think, Johnny. As I said to Ger, the fallback here of going out of Europe in the round 16, which is not surprising if it happens, is that we're back in the mix in the league, and that we can, get into those knockout stages, because there's not many teams who fancy playing Connacht and kind of knock out URC situation, because they're very capable of mixing with everybody. It's just getting an 80-minute performance. So I think it would be really damaging if they lost this game by a big score. Is it any good to them, even if they're going out, if they get a good performance? Well, it is. It's something to build on. It's something to say that, look, this is the level we need to be at. And we backed it up from the sports ground last week. So I think there's a lot to be said for them, and a lot to take from it to get a good performance here.
Can we talk about Munster? And we'll talk about the game in a moment. We obviously have had Graham Rowntree confirmed since we last spoke to you. A question from Porrick, who's listening in. How did it take Munster this long to promote the fella who already worked there and who said several months ago that he wanted the job? It's a reasonable question.
It is a reasonable question, I think. And probably the reason is, I think they were, maybe there's a couple of factors here, Jared, that it's the timing of getting a head coach a year and a bit out from a World Cup, mid-season, a lot of coaches contracted in good positions. Some maybe didn't fancy it. We saw, Rog kind of ruled himself out at the start. He was on Munster's radar for obvious reasons. Scott Robertson was being mentioned in New Zealand, which again, any club in the world would be interested in talking to him. And I'm not privy to the other applicants who applied, but it would suggest that there was a process that went on that, maybe they weren't sure about the CVs of some guys that were coming through, and it took time. And then from an RFU's point of view, I think they probably wanted to, it should have been quicker anyway. That's the first thing I should say. It should have been quicker, but I think, and I saw some comments from people online about continuity, that one comment was continuity is the last thing Munster need, but I think it's continuity in knowing the players. And I said this in the podcast the other day. It's important that there's somebody there who knows the strengths and weaknesses of players. And the reality here is the players themselves have got to take ownership. There's a lot of, I know the buck stops with the head coach, but the players have got to get better. And Graham Rowntree now has to be ruthless in his decision making. And if players need to be released and changes, it has to happen. He's got to be really ruthless, because unfortunately the honeymoon period here for Graham is not going to be the same as a new coach coming in. He's going to get some time for sure, and the coaches he picks are going to get a little bit of time. But there's a lot of frustration there, and there's a belief that there's been a bit of time wasted, a period of 5 years where, of course, there has been some progress, but it's been up and down and up and down. And a lot of the same stories keep appearing about attack and lack of ambition. We're just talking about Connacht a minute ago there.
Yeah.
I want Munster, Jared, to be a side that people say they're a great side to watch. Not that they're negative, and not that they're... and I think the players themselves would probably embrace this. And I cannot, for the life of me, think that there'd be any player in any group, in any team, would think, I don't want to be, throw the ball around and try and be a bit ambitious and attack more. There is games that we have to shove it up the jumper, and I've played in those over the years. And you know what? They're great wins as well. There's a great buzz in the dressing room afterwards where you're dogging it out, picking and going. Rog was kicking it up in the air, and we were suffocating the opposition. There's a great feeling in winning those games sometimes as well, because you just can't go out and throw the ball around. But that's the big obvious one that has to change. Yeah. And it has taken too long.
It has. And it'll be interesting to see who they get in the backroom team. Brendan Fanning floats the idea today in the I'm reading in the Herald, but it's also in the Irish Independent, obviously, that now that they know who the guy is and he's there and he's available and he's in the building, why is Van Graan still in charge for the rest of the season? The end of the line is the choreography in this one, where the South African is presented as the man in control up until his flight has cleared Irish airspace, is pathetic. If David Nucifora believes he's got his man, then get on with it. I think this is a good point. Why don't they just make the manager, the head coach, the head coach?
I know. I suppose it's a funny one, really. It's never really happened before that you've had this kind of promotion within during the season, and that's it's strange. It's strange, but I just think in the middle of where they're at the moment now, I think it'd be too unsettling. They've had a lot of uncertainty, and there's relevance to that. There's relevance. Is Rion van Gran's mind, and I don't know, question the guy's integrity, but there has to be a tiny part of his mind is thinking about who he's signing for Bath next year and what kind of preparations are going on there. So
is the status quo unsettling as it is, though? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I suppose the other point is that his whole
they'll say Johnny that it's not, and that we're all going to be professional here, but it's a very strange situation, and maybe it should have been handled a little bit differently. But look, I think.
Well, who would the defence coach be
if
Van Gran goes? Like, is it just Van Gran, or does he take everybody who's going with him?
Yeah, I just think, look, it's too risky, Ger, to do that. But Brendan Fanning has a point in what he's saying. Why not shift over now? But if it falls apart, and I think, look, they're going to keep doing what they're doing till the end of the season, whether any of us have an opinion on it or not. But it's a strange dynamic that the boss is leaving and the boss is under him at the moment. So it's they've just got to get on with it now. The announcement is made, and I don't think any of us dissecting it anymore as regards what the coaches should or shouldn't do with leaving now or leaving at the end of the season. Yeah. It's not going to happen, so it's kind of irrelevant.
Are they going through? We're out of time. Are they going to go through?
I don't know, Jared. I'd be very wary. I think Exeter will really believe that they left it behind them last week, and I think they'll be confident. They were in Limerick a couple of years ago and beaten just narrowly by probably a stronger Munster team. So, look, I would love to say I'm confident, but I'm more wary. I really think they can, but they've obviously got to eradicate all the turnovers and the penalties that they gave away last week.
Okay. All right. Good stuff. Enjoy the games, Quilly. Thanks a million.
Cheers. Thanks, lads.
Alan Quinlan, you can hear him on the Red 78 podcast. And if you want to know what Graham Rowntree is going to be like as a head coach and what he thinks about the game and how he speaks about it, he did a full hour-long interview with Quinny and Neve a couple of weeks ago, and you'll find that in the OTB Rugby podcast feed. The easiest place to get it is if you subscribe to the Red 78 podcast. Search for that wherever you get your pods. OTB AM is brought to you live each morning by Gillette Labs for an effortless finish to your day.